Hey everyone, and welcome back. If you're here, I bet you're as excited about this week's Intune updates as I am.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Microsoft really did a number on us this time around. They actually released 2 sets of release notes.
Really a lot to go over.
A ton to unpack.
It's
So
going to be a good one.
it is going to be good. So we're going to call this the Intune Update Bonanza.
Okay, I like it.
And just as a quick reminder, Intune, it's that cloud-based service from Microsoft that helps you manage all your devices and apps in your organization.
Keeps everything secure, keeps everything running smoothly.
Exactly. So let's dive right into some of these juicy updates. And there's one in particular that caught my eye right away. It's a small change, but it could make a world of difference for those of you out there managing Apple devices.
You think about that VPP token name, visibility.
That's the one.
Yeah.
VPP tokens, those are what connect your Intune environment to Apple's volume purchase program so you can buy and distribute apps in bulk.
Right. And I don't know about you, but I used to spend way too much time trying to figure out which token went with which app.
Oh, yeah. It was a nightmare. It was like, where's Waldo? But for IT admins.
Exactly. A lot of wasted time.
But now with this update, the name of each VPP token is visible right there in the Intune console.
Oh, it's so nice.
So much easier to keep track of everything.
Simple but effective.
Yeah, small change, big impact. And speaking of Apple, we've got some cool updates for managed home screen as well.
Oh, yeah, some good ones in there.
For those who may not know, managed home screen, it's basically Intune's way of creating this really streamlined, secure experience on Android devices.
Right. Really useful for shared devices or frontline workers, those folks who are always on the go.
Exactly. So what's new with managed home screen?
Well, one of the big things is they've introduced QR code authentication.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So picture this. You're working in retail employees are sharing devices all the time.
Yeah.
Instead of typing in their usernames and passwords every single time, they can just scan a QR code and boom, they're in.
Much faster.
Much faster, more secure, less room for error.
And probably less frustrated employees too.
Absolutely. Happier employees all around. But the updates don't stop there. We've got...
Keep coming.
IT admins now have access to more device details right from the managed home screen app.
Oh, that's handy.
Yeah, so that means easier troubleshooting, a clearer picture of what's happening on each device. And wait, there's more.
Hit me.
There's a ringtone selector now.
Wait a minute. Users can choose their own ringtones, even in a managed environment.
That's right. A little bit of personalization can go a long way.
I like it. It's all about finding that balance, right, between control and user experience.
Exactly.
Happy users, happy IT admins.
Everybody wins. Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit and talk about device configuration. There's some pretty interesting updates to Windows AI settings.
Ooh, AI. That's a hot topic these days.
It is, and these updates are particularly interesting because they really address those growing concerns around data privacy and AI.
It's funny you mention that because I was just reading an article about that the other day. It seems like everywhere you turn, AI is collecting our data.
Right. It's everywhere.
And it's hard to know what's happening with it.
Exactly. And that's why these new settings are so important. They give users more control over how their data is being used.
Okay, so before we dive into the specifics, can we just take a step back and explain what we mean by recall in the context of Windows AI features?
Absolutely. Good point. So recall basically refers to how Windows AI uses your data to personalize your experience and offer suggestions.
Okay, so like if I'm writing a document, an AI-powered feature might recall similar files I've worked on before or information I've accessed.
Exactly, to help you work more efficiently.
So are these new settings giving us control over how much of that data is being analyzed and stored?
That's exactly it. You now have the ability to completely disable data analysis, set limits on storage space and duration, even specify which apps and websites are allowed to use that recall functionality.
Wow, that's impressive. Really granular control there.
It is, and I think it's going to be a big deal for users and organizations who are, concerned about data privacy and AI usage.
For sure, especially with all the new regulations popping up around AI.
Absolutely. It's a constantly evolving landscape.
Okay, so we've talked about Apple, we've talked about AI. What else is new in the world of device configuration?
Well, there's an important update to the Intune connector for Active Directory, specifically for folks using Intune to manage those hybrid join autopilot flows.
Okay, hold on. I need a quick refresher. What exactly does the Intune connector do?
Sure. So it basically acts as a bridge between your on-premises Active Directory and the cloud-based Intune service.
Okay, right. So you can manage devices that are both on your network and off.
Exactly.
Gotcha. So what's changing with the connector?
Well, they're updating it to use a low privileged account, which is great news for security.
Oh, less privilege, the better, right?
Absolutely. It limits the connector's access to only what it absolutely needs to function.
Right. So if there's a security breach, the potential impact is much smaller.
Exactly. Minimizing those risks.
Yeah. Love to see it. Anything else our listeners need to know about this update?
Yeah, just a heads up, the old connector is going to be deprecated soon.
Okay.
So it's important to make the switch to the new version as soon as possible.
So you don't run into any issues.
Avoid those disruptions.
Got it. We'll be sure to include links to the relevant documentation in the show notes for everyone.
Sounds good.
All right. Before we move on to device security, I want to touch on one more update in the device configuration realm. We've got a whole bunch of new settings in the Apple settings catalog for both iOS, iPadOS, and macOS.
Oh, yeah. Looks like IT admins have even more control over Apple devices now.
They do. We're talking about things like cross-site tracking prevention, allowed external intelligence workspace IDs, and even whether to allow satellite connections.
It's amazing how these controls are constantly evolving, to keep up with all the new technologies and security concerns.
Absolutely. Satellite connections, for example, is relatively new.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're seeing specific settings to manage their use in an enterprise environment. It really highlights how important it is to stay up to date with these Intune releases.
You gotta.
Every week there's something new to learn and adapt to.
Absolutely. It's a constantly moving target, but that's part of what makes it so interesting.
I agree. All right.
On to device security.
Let's do it.
Speaking of staying up to date, let's move on to one of the bigger updates this week. It's all about device security.
Okay, hit me.
It's Microsoft Defender device control on Windows.
Ooh, device control. That sounds pretty serious. But before we get into the nitty-gritty, could you give us a quick rundown of what it is and why it's so important for security?
Sure thing. So imagine device control as like a set of rules that basically dictate what devices can and can't do on your network.
Okay, I'm listening.
It's like having a really strict bouncer or a club. They decide who gets in and who doesn't.
Right.
So you can use device control to, say, prevent the use of USB drives, to protect sensitive data.
Makes sense.
Or even restrict access to certain types of hardware to prevent those unauthorized connections.
So it's all about minimizing risk.
Right. Exactly. Data breaches, security incidents, you name it. Device control can help.
So like setting up a digital perimeter around your organization's devices, only letting in the good stuff.
That's a great way to put it. And these new Intune updates, they give IT admins even more control over how device control works.
Okay, more control is always good. So what kind of control are we talking about here?
Well, there are two new settings that give you that granular control over device control on Windows devices.
All right, let's hear them.
First one, it's called device control enabled.
Okay.
Pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah, so you can turn the whole device control feature on or off.
Exactly like a master switch.
Okay, what about the second setting?
All right, so that one is called default enforcement. And this one determines how device control behaves when there isn't a specific rule in place.
Interesting. So like if a device tries to do something and there's no rule telling it whether it's allowed or not, what happens then?
Exactly. So with default enforcement, you've got two options.
Cool.
You can choose default allow enforcement.
Which means?
Anything that's not explicitly blocked is allowed.
Okay.
Or you can go with default deny enforcement.
And that flips it.
Yeah. So anything that's not explicitly allowed is blocked.
So like a zero trust approach, assume everything's risky unless you specifically say it's okay.
Precisely, much more cautious can be super beneficial in high security environments.
Makes sense. Got to keep those bad actors out. All right, these device control settings, they sound pretty powerful for those IT admins who are, really focused on security.
They are powerful tools, no doubt.
So what else is going on in the Intune world this week?
Well, we've got one more update. Might come as a bit of a surprise.
Okay, bring it on.
There's a new protected app for Intune.
A protected app, what's that?
So a protected app, it's basically an app that has met specific security and compliance standards set by Microsoft.
Okay, so like a seal of approval.
You got it.
It's been thoroughly vetted, it's trustworthy.
Exactly.
Interesting. So what's this new protected app all about?
It's called Applications Manager Intune by Manage Engine, and it's a solution for managing, you guessed it, applications within Intune.
Makes sense.
So it gives you a central platform to deploy update monitor applications across all your organization's devices.
That's pretty handy, especially for IT admins who are already juggling a million things.
Right. And it's great to know that it has that added layer of security and trustworthiness from Microsoft.
Definitely. Microsoft's really stepping up their game with these Intune updates.
They are.
We've got simplified simplified app management, enhanced security features, even new ways to control AI.
Don't forget those little touches that improve the user experience.
Oh yeah, like that ringtone selector
That's right.
for managed home screen.
It's all about balance, control security and keeping those users happy.
Exactly, finding that sweet spot. Yeah, it seems like Microsoft's always adding something new to Intune.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They're definitely not slowing down.
Always pushing the boundaries of what it can do.
Well, and it makes sense, right? The workplace is constantly changing, new devices, new apps, new security threats popping up all the time.
Yeah, you got to keep up.
Intune's got to keep pace to stay relevant.
It's like a never-ending race,
It is a race.
Stay ahead of the curve. But that's kind of what makes it fun, right?
Oh, absolutely. Always something new to learn.
Always something to explore.
Yeah.
And that's really what we try to do with this deep dive.
Yeah.
Break down some of those key updates.
Help folks make sense of it all.
But we always encourage our listeners to check out the full documentation too. There's so much more to discover.
Definitely dive deeper into the details.
We'll include links to everything we talked about in the show notes. So
easy to find.
Yeah, you can easily find it.
Yeah.
But before we wrap things up, I know you like to leave our listeners with something to think about.
Always got to have a little food for thought.
All right. So what's on your mind this week?
Well, we talked about those new AI controls in Windows, right? And how they give users more control over their data.
Yeah, really interesting stuff.
It got me thinking about, as AI becomes more integrated into our lives, it really raises some big questions about that balance between convenience and privacy.
That's a tough one. It seems like we're always giving up a little bit of privacy for a little bit more convenience.
It's a trade-off, right? So the question is, how do you think this balance is going to evolve, in the coming years? Are we going to have to choose one or the other? Or can we actually have both?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Something to ponder.
Yeah, something for everyone to think about as we navigate this crazy digital world. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the latest Intune updates. We'll catch you next time with even more insights.
See you then.